Hey there, business owners. Ready to supercharge your workflow? Meet Make.com, your ultimate automation platform. You can connect your favorite apps, automating all your tedious tasks and unlocking more time to focus on what really matters, growing your business. From streamlining sales to boosting customer support, Make.com makes it all happen effortlessly. No coding required. Imagine workflows that run around the clock, 24/7. That's the power of automation. Are you ready to transform your business? Let's dive in and see how Make.com can revolutionize the way you work. Okay, so first up, we're going to sign up to Make.com. Now, to get to this sign up page, we just need to go to the Make.com homepage and then click on the sign up button. So get started for free is their call to action there. And then that will take us to this page here. In terms of the hosting region, most of you will probably be in the US, but there's just two different regions. You do want to pick the region that is closest to wherever your main business is going to be, because that's going to be where the servers are based in Make.com. And if you're doing most of your operations in Europe, then you want those servers based in Europe. And if you're doing most of it in the US, then you want them based in the US. So now we've signed up here. Has been successfully verified. So now we can sign in. There we go. So now when I first sign in, I'm greeted with this sort of onboarding flow. Doesn't particularly matter what we put into here. It's really just for the analytics. It doesn't change anything in the platform. So I'm just going to select some random options here. And you can see here in the browser that we're doing a bit of authorization here, and then it does a redirect. That's a little bit of a hint towards how these websites and things work, because we're going to be doing something similar as we build scenarios. So here we've got our main page. We've got our organization. You can change that word up here, the name of the organization if you like. I'll set this to Mitch's test organization. You can also set the time zone here. It's important that you set the time zone to match whatever time zone you're in, because if you don't, then things get a little bit more complex down the road. So make sure that's correct. Then you can add additional team members here. You won't be able to do that if you're on the free plan, but if you're on a paid plan, you can certainly do that. You can manage your subscription, have a look at previous payments, and then you can pretty much just ignore these 3 or 4 at the end there to get started. Now, down the left-hand side here, we've got our organization, our homepage. Then we've got our team page, which is going to be just our users page. And then we've got the scenarios page. Now, the scenarios page is our automation hub. That's where everything that we've automated lives. So a scenario is an automation workflow. You can have as many scenarios as you like in here. If you're on the free plan, then you'll be limited to, I think, 3 scenarios, but that's plenty for what we're trying to build today. You can create folders here to organize the scenarios if you like. However, you'll be able to just search for their name and also search for the name of the apps that you're using within the scenarios here. You've got the templates here. They're pretty good to get an idea of how things might work to get started. Then we've got our connections, which will be a list of all the different applications that we've got connected. We can add a new connection here, and we can search for existing connections there as well. Then we've got webhooks, and these will be all of our custom webhooks that we've connected. We'll cover a little bit about that later on in the tutorial. And then underneath them all, we've got some additional things like keys, devices, data stores, data structures, and custom apps. Now, we're not going to cover any of those in this basic tutorial, but if you are in that sort of 20% that is going to use or need some custom applications built or some data structures, data stores, then I recommend upgrading to the paid Make.com advanced course that I've got on my website, and I cover in detail all of those things inside of that course. Okay, so now let's talk about some common terms inside of Make.com. First, we've got our scenario, and the scenario is the workflow, the automation thing that we're building. So inside of Make.com, this entire page is our scenario. And here we've got our scenarios list under this page. So the scenario is the thing, the bucket, that hold all the logic for one automation, one process that you've automated. Then we've got a module. Now, a module is steps that you've added to your scenario So here we'll just add a basic trigger, and this is one module. Now, if we add something else to that, let's add a variable, that would be the second module. So here we can add modules for different applications. For instance, Airtable, we can add a module here to get an Airtable record. We can add a module here for Calendly to connect to our Calendly system and list the events, etc. So each one of these is one module. So we've got 4 modules within our scenario. Then we've got a trigger. Now a trigger is a very special type of module. It is the first module in our sequence. So here we can see we've got 4 modules that have been connected together with these circle connectors, with these routes, right? And as we drag them around, you can see that that path, it's still connecting those 2 modules together. And that's because a scenario works in a very specific way. When a scenario runs, it will always start from the trigger. And in this case, our trigger is this module here. Now, you may think, I want the Calendly to be the trigger, so I'll just put that in the front and I'll move these over here. But that's not correct, because the scenario, when it runs, it's still going to run from this module here, because that's still our trigger. Now, you can always quickly find the trigger in the scenario because it has a clock icon over it. It will either have a clock icon or it will have a lightning bolt icon. Now, I've messed up the order here, so I'm just going to quickly go down to auto align in the settings on the bottom, click that, and then that puts it in the correct order of how it's going to run in my automation. Now, if I'm ever unsure on where it's going to start and what's going to happen in the logic, I can always click on this plane and that will explain the flow. So you can see, okay, here's my scenario running and it's going to start from here, going to move here, move there, and then move there. So that is our trigger module. And I'll get into a bit more on the special settings and functions of that module later when we go to build our scenario. Then we've got an action. Now, an action is the actual thing that happens within the module itself. So for instance, here we'll add a set variable module. And within this module, we can then add some properties. So I'm going to set the variable name as test, and I'm going to set the value of this variable as 1, 2, 3. When we run our scenario here with the run once button, we can see that it starts here at the set variable module, our trigger module. Then the action of that module is that it sets the variable test to the value 1, 2, 3. Now, in terms of make.com, you've got the name of the thing, which is above the field input. And in this particular case, for a variable module, we can set a custom name for that variable. And I've just set it to test, but it might be email or phone number, whatever you want to call it. Now, normally you would not write in the value, you would map it from something else, from a different module, and we'll get into how to do that later. But for now, you can see that the action of this particular module is to set the value of this variable. Now, later on in the scenario, we're then calling the variable, and the action of this particular module is not to set the value, but to actually read the value. And that's why we've got set variable and get variable, 2 different modules, 2 different actions. And if we see the output of this, we can see that the module has fetched the value of the variable called test, and the value is 1, 2, 3. To give you a bit more explainer here, we can keep that as test 1, 2, 3. And I'll put another get between them. And then we'll change the same test to, we'll just change that to 2, 3, 4. And we're going to run that here. So here we can see the first module, the action there is to set the value test to 1, 2, 3. Then this second module, the action is to get the value for test, which is 1, 2, 3. The third module then says, okay, I want to set the new value for the variable test, and it sets it to 2, 3, 4. Fourth module, the get variable, it gets the same variable of test, but now it has 2, 3, 4. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is because inside the automation, you have a sequence of events. And the automation or set scenario always starts with the trigger module. Then you can see the next one that runs is the get variable. Then the next one is this third one in the line. Then the fourth one runs. And you can see, because we're setting the value to 1, 2, 3, when this one runs, it then has the value of 1, 2, 3. But after this one runs, we're then setting the value of 2, 3, 4. So when this one runs, it now has the value of 2, 3, 4, even though it's the same variable. So the order of things in the scenario matter. Then you've got connections. Now a connection is a specific application that you're connecting to Make.com. For instance, let's connect to Airtable. So we select Airtable or our application from the search. Then when you first add that application to your scenario, you're going to have an option here to create a connection. So we can click on that here. And for instance, Airtable, we need to set a token or a key. Depending on the applications, each one is going to be different as to what you need to collect to then create this connection to that service. Airtable wants a personal access token. So we'd have to go to Airtable, get that token, and then put the token in here. And then now we've established our connection. Once you've created a connection, you don't need to recreate that connection again in Make.com. Depending on the application that you've got connected, you may be able to set limitations as to what that particular connection can see and edit. Then we've got a router. Now, a router is a very special module in that it allows us to create two paths, to split one path into two, or even to split one path into many. So a router module lives in the tools here, and we can drag and drop that router module into our scenario. Now, to add it between two modules, we need to break that connection. Then we can drag it up, and you can see it automatically clicks into place here. If we click the router, then it will create a new route for us in our logic. So let's now get a route. We'll put in a variable here, get variable. So now we've created two routes. So let's just see how this works in our logic. Here's our trigger. Then at the router, we have the first path is taken. Then the second path is taken. Now, if you think of this as like a fork in the road, you've got road A goes up to the left, road B goes down to the right. Now, unlike when you're driving a car, the data inside of this scenario goes up both A and down path B. It doesn't choose A or B. There is a way to do that, but that's not what's happening here currently. It will always go up A all the way to the end of whatever A has, might have 10 modules here, and then it will go back to the router and it will go down route B and do all the modules and logic there. And you can add a router by right-clicking a path as well, and then add router. And you can have multiple routers in your logic. This becomes really important later on as you build more complex automations and scenarios. Next, we've got filters, and really filters work best when you combine them with a router. So here we can see we've got a router and it's got two paths on it. What we can do is we can click on a path. That then opens up our filter options. Now here is where we can put certain values into this filter. What we could do is we could say if the variable for test is equal to 1, 2, 3, then we pass the filter and we then get the variable. If the variable is not equal to 1, 2, 3, then we will set the variable to 2, 3, 4. So when we run this logic here, we'll see that now our data will only go up one path. We can see the value was 1, 2, 3. And if we look at our filter, the value of test was equal to 1, 2, 3. So it took the first path. It did not do the second path. And that means that everything in this second path would not have run. We can add some extra modules in here. So everything in this path here didn't run at all. Now we can see that because the filter has a number on it. And it tells us that of all the data bundles here, one of the data bundles went up path 1 or path A, but none of the data bundles, 0, went down path B. Now, if we adjust either the filter or the data, we'll get a different result. So let's just adjust this data to 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we run, we can see that 1, 2, 3, 4 is not equal to 1, 2, 3. Therefore, it doesn't go up path A. Now it goes down path B. Now, I've also got the option here of creating a fallback path, which is if option A cannot be reached, then it will fall back and go down option B. Now, you do have to be careful of fallbacks in that if you have more than one path available, the fallback will only work if all of the other paths cannot be taken. So if we put these onto here, and we'll get rid of this one, we can see that we have our logic. It doesn't go up path 1, but it doesn't fall back to path 2 because it can still go down path 3. Now, I cover filters and how to really use them and stack them a lot more in the course, but for now, that's all you really need to know. Then we've got error handling. Now, error handling is done on a per module basis. So for instance, this particular module has an error, missing value of parameter name. And that's because we didn't put a name in this value here. So we could get rid of that module here, or we could add an error handler. So you can right click on any module, except for the green modules don't have error handlers, but all the other sort of modules that you add will have an error handler. Here we can say add error handler. Now, when we do that, we create a different type of path. This particular path is only taken if this module errors. If something happens here that breaks the logic that you've got, then it will take this errored path. Now, on the error path, we can put an option of how we want to handle this error. The main one is just the ignore option. So here we can say, if we get an error, just ignore the error and then continue on down all the other paths and finish the logic in the scenario. Here, the text characters are not able to be parsed into a date. This is not a date format. It doesn't say Saturday, doesn't say Monday, doesn't have year, date, month, etc. It's just nonsense in here. So it throws an error because it can't parse the value that we've given it as a date. Now, here I've just said, look, just ignore it whenever that happens. I don't care about the error, don't need to be notified of it, just ignore it. If we had another module after that module that errored, you'll notice that because we ignored this error, the modules after this one do not run. Just stop there and ignore it. If we had other modules after this one, a different path, then you'll notice that those paths still complete. It's only if it's in the current path that an error happens, that it will then not continue on with the rest of that current path. But the other paths in the scenario will still continue on, because what happens at this router module is we have our data there, and then it basically splits into 4, and it says, okay, I'm going to do path 1 with data packet 1, path 2 with data packet 2, path 3 with 3, and 4 with 4, right? So it splits here and then does each of these paths independently. We've also got aggregators and iterators. We're not going to cover that in this tutorial because they're more of an advanced topic, and I do cover those in the free Make course on my website, where it's specifically talking about aggregators and iterators, which is where new users have the most issues. So now we've got the basics of Make.com down, we're going to actually start building our first scenario. Now, before we can really start to build our scenario, we have to map out what we're trying to do. So first, we're going to have our call platform. And I'm just going to put a square here to represent that. We'll need a call app or a scheduler app to start our scenario. This is going to be our trigger. Then we're going to connect this call scheduler app to something else. We're going to connect it to our email platform. Now, to do that, we want to send the data of our lead to our email platform. So we'll need to make some notes here of we're going to need to subscribe them. And we might also need to start them on a sequence in our email platform. So we'll do another one here and we'll start them on a sequence. So pretty simple so far. We're not needing to do a router or add any filters or anything here yet. We may need to add a router or some filters in between our call booked and our email sequence, possibly, because we may have different sequences for different calls. We might have our onboarding sequence, our new lead sequence, and we might have an existing customer sequence. So we might need to have logic here to create our paths. But for now, I think we could just start with our call and our email. This will add on as step 2. Now we've got a rough mud map of what we're trying to build. We can go ahead and start building it. So we need to find something to do our call scheduling or our call app with. Now here's one that I recommend if you just want a free one. You can also use other ones like Calendly, Acuity, etc. When you're looking at applications and deciding on which ones to use, the first thing you want to look for is, do they have an API? Now, 80% of applications, or maybe 60%, will have an API. So the first thing I do when I go to an application that I like, that I want to connect to, is I scroll all the way down, and on the bottom of their website, they will normally have something like API or development, documentation, something like that, developers. They'll have that listed in this sort of section. If you see that, then you know that they have an API. So they pass the first test. The second test is I go to their pricing page, and quite often they'll limit their API based on the pricing plan that you subscribe to. Some of them will not have any API access on a free plan, or very limited access on a paid plan, and you may only get full API access on one of their higher plans. Some apps also charge per API call. Now, what is an API? Well, an API is really just a way for us, or for two computers, to talk to one another. We can get information and we can send information. And we can do that all in the cloud without a human having to do any data transfer. That all happens digitally in the cloud for us. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing here in Make.com. So here I can see, okay, we've got our free plan. I scroll down here. I could do a search on the page for API as well if I wanted to, but they'll normally have like integrations, that sort of thing. And I can see here, okay, we've got integrations, tracking, blah, blah. It doesn't look like we've got API listed there. There we go. So via Zapier. So sometimes they say via Zapier or Make.com. If you see Zapier or Make, you could be fairly certain that you'll be able to connect to that application. So that's our call scheduling app. Our next app is going to be our email marketing system. Now, Sender.com is a great system, very simple email marketing platform. You could also use something like MailerLite, ActiveCampaign, MailChimp, any of those. Just be mindful that they need to have their API for you to be able to access them. So for this, we'll use Simply Meet Me and Sender. So now we've got our applications sorted. We need to connect them to Make.com. To do that, we open up our scenario editor, and we just need to click on any module in that scenario. So wherever you see a plus sign, we can click and add that. We can click and add a connection here as well in the bottom right. Here, I'm just going to click on the trigger module. Then we'll just search for our application. In this case, we're using Simply Book Me, and we want to use a watch booked events. Now you can see here that there's quite a few options for the different endpoint or an action that we have available. For this particular example, we're just going to want to watch for new events that are booked, new calls that get booked. So we're going to select that action. And you can see here that we've got two little texts here saying instant and acid. Now, if it is an instant trigger, as soon as that call gets booked, we get sent the data of the call. If it is an acid trigger, we have to call that data every so often. Normally we'd call it like once a day or once every 4 or 5 hours, something like that, depending on how often the data is being updated, how often people are booking calls. But here we've got the option of an instant trigger, which is normally the one that you'd want to use. So we'll select our module. Then we want to create a webhook. And now we know that this webhook is going to be used for whenever a call is being booked on this platform. We'll copy the address here, And then we need to go over to this platform and see where they want us to add this call event. So quite often it will be under something like settings or integrations. Here we've got integrations, so we'll select that. And we'll just have a look here. It's not immediately obvious where to put our webhook. We could look at some of their support documentation to find out what they want us to do. But I know that Zapier and Make.com are fairly similar applications. So I'm just going to explore how should I connect if I want to connect to Zapier. I'm going to click on connect here, and there's where I need to put my webhook. So here I've got three options or three fields that I can put my webhook into. I've got a webhook for when a meeting is scheduled, when a meeting is cancelled, and when one is rescheduled. Now here we just want to test the scheduled one. We can send a test to our webhook address. So what I did there was I sent data from this application to Make.com. Now, whenever we connect a new application, particularly a webhook, we want to prime that webhook with the data. We want to receive the data so we know what structure it is in, what data we're going to get, what we're not going to get, etc. So to do that, you would add your module, then you click on Run Once. And because this is an instant module, it's just going to sit there listening. I'm listening for the data to come in. And now we need to send it that data. So we're just going to click Test, which is going to send some test data to that listener. And now we've collected the data. And you can see here's everything that we've received from this test. Now we know that whenever someone books a call, we're going to get this data sent almost instantly. Now, what do we want to do with this data? Next, we want to send that to sender.net. So we'll open our new module here, and we'll just type in sender, and we'll click on see more because I know I need to create a subscriber first. So I'm going to create my subscriber there, and you can see I need to follow the same process of adding that connection as well. This time it wants an API key. So I'm going to go across to sender. Now, quite often API keys are either going to be under the settings or under your profile. Here I can see it's under settings, API tokens, and then I can create my token here. So I'll just set the token to be valid for 1 day just for our testing purposes. And we'll just paste in the API key here. And you can call that whatever you like. I'm just going to call it Mitch's test account. And then it's going to essentially make a call to that application and say, hey, have I got the right information? And then the application is going to say, yes, you do. Here's the keys to the kingdom. And then it's going to pre-fill or create some fields for you to then add data into. We can see here that one of these fields has a field name in bold, and the rest of these fields are not in bold. Now, why is that? Well, that's because the bold field is a required field. This particular module with this particular connection and this particular action requires an email address. And when you think about it, we can't create a subscriber unless we have their email address. So here we're just going to add an email address. Now, you can see here we've got our mapping options. When we click on a field, we will have our mapping options window open. If you're not inside a field, you're not going to see the mapping options. So we'll click into the email field, and here is everything that we can map from all the previous modules before the module that we're editing. So because this is the second module in our sequence, there's only one module before. You can see that this module here has its own unique data, and this sender module has its own unique data, and then our first module has its own unique data. So each module has their own data that you can map from. And you can see here that the sender only gets access to the one module before it. This second module gets access to the two modules before it. And this third one sees all three of those modules' datas because they come before that module there. So let's add our email address. Now you could scroll down and try and find the email in the list here. That's a little bit time consuming, but you can also do a search here. And as long as you know what that's going to be called, email is generally called email or email address, then we can add that to our mapping pretty quickly. We can also do a drag and drop here. So we can just click on something and type and drag and drop. And that's quite handy when you're doing things like name, because you can find the first name, you can find the last name, and you can drag and drop them both in. Right, so now we've dragged and dropped our data into these places. So what is going to happen is whenever a call is booked, this scenario is going to run instantly. And if I do another test here, send my data to make.com, we can see it page refreshes to confirm my test. Then I click on the run once. I'm going to have new data there waiting to be processed in my logic. So I'm going to click on use the existing data, my test data. And that's going to collect the test data, which we can see here. And we can see our invitee information, John at doe@example.com. And that's what's going to end up in my email system. So if I click over to my sender.com module, I can see that make.com sent in the data of the email address and the data of the first name to my sender account. Now, if I go to my subscribers in sender, I will have John Doe existing in my subscriber. Here he is there. So there's John and there's Doe as his email address. So you can see, okay, call is booked, data goes to email platform, that all works fine. Next, we need to say our email platform, we don't just want to send subscribers there and not do anything with them. We want to start them on an automated email drip. Now, depending on your email service that you're using, each one uses a different way to do this. So you may need to add a tag to a subscriber, and then in this sequence, the tag would be the trigger, or you could add them directly to the sequence, or maybe you need to add them to a group, which is what we need to do in this case. And then the group is then used as the trigger to start the automation. So here, to add them to a group, we first need to add a group. And this is a bit more on the sender side rather than make, but all comes together. So we'll just call this our call booked group. And we'll save that there. And now we've got our group that we can add them to. And we'll also just create an automation here. And our automation, we'll just say call booked is our automation name. And you'll notice I'm trying to keep my naming the same all the way through. Call booked. For you, it might be appointment booked, whatever you want to call it. But call booked is what I'm using here. And I'm just connecting them all up so they all have the same wording. Then here I've got a choice of option of triggers. So I'm going to select subscriber joins a group. I also have these other triggers that I could have used, but I find just joining a group is the easiest one here. So subscriber joins a group, great. Now I need to select what group that is. I'm going to select call booked, and I'm just going to click save. So now they are going to start this workflow here, and then we can send them an email here as well. Then we can come back over here and we can select from our groups. Now you'll see here that our call booked group does not exist in the drop-down list. Now we could get that by refreshing it, which would mean clicking out of the module and then clicking back in. We could also click on the refresh button within the dropdown. And that means that it just does that one call for that one dropdown to get the latest data. So I'll just select call booked here. Now here you can see I can just check mark the subscriber that I want to subscribe to this group. I could do that, but that's not the right way to do it because it means that every time that this runs, it's just going to always add doe@example.com to that group. And even if 5 different people with 5 different email addresses submitted the call, it would just still add doe@example.com because that's the hard-coded value that we've sent it. We instead want to send a dynamic value to this platform. So to do that, we need to change this to a map function. And of course, we'll delete that hard-written value and we'll put in the email address. Now, because I know that the subscriber needs to exist on sender.com, I'll use the same email that I used to create that subscriber. So I can't add them to a group unless a subscriber is already existing. So I'll just add that as the email there. And then we can run this scenario and it will then add them to the group. And when it adds them to the group, it will then start this automation in sender. Okay, so we've just tested our scenario here. Now, to do a test of this logic, set the scenario to run. That will then start listening for the new data coming in. And then we can go back to our Simply Meet and we can send a test of that data to our scenario. And we can see it instantly processes, creates a subscriber, and then adds them to the group in Sender. So this is a successful test. But what happens if the email address was missing? Let's just say we had our email address here, and we're just going to remove that and put in a number. It's not going to allow that. We're going to put a variable here to map in instead. We're going to try and deliberately break this logic. All right, so we'll just set this variable as email, and instead of putting a valid email, we're just going to put a number in there. I'm going to click run again, and remember we have to retest this because we've used the existing data that we sent before. Therefore, we need to send new data to run the test. We've created a false email or a broken email here, and then we've tried to map that broken email into this module, and we've got an error. And it says the email address is invalid. So when that happens on this particular module, and it could happen if we have the email is not required on our call scheduler. So when that email is not valid, we can add a error handler here, and we could just say, look, if it's not valid, we'll just ignore it, and there's no point trying to subscribe them to a group because we can't create the subscriber anyway. So let's just run that here, and then I will send a new test again. And you can see now, instead of erroring the scenario and turning it off and leaving it off for everybody else that tries to book in for a call, it's just going to leave the scenario on, and it's just going to say, couldn't do that one step, I'm just going to ignore it for that one call that was booked, that one person that had the error. I'm just going to ignore it, and then the rest of the people after that person are going to go through the logic like normal. Now, the only problem with this is that I don't get notified when this error happens, when it gets ignored. So you may want to add into here an extra step of sending you an email. You could also log it in something like Airtable. Then let's talk about scheduling the scenario. So we could change this from an immediately run scenario to any of these options here. So I could set this scenario to run every day at a specific time. Now, if I set that, it would mean that as the calls come in, they're just going to be queued up in this scenario. And then at 12:34 p.m., it's going to then run everything in that queue, everything that came in between 12:34 p.m. today and 12:34 p.m. yesterday when it last ran the scenario. I could also process on specific days of the week at a specific time. For instance, you may have a scenario where you want to send them a special discount code, but you only want to do that for the month of December. You can set that here in your logic. For now, we'll just set this back to immediate, which is what most of you will use. Now, a few other things that you might want to do here. So you might want to maybe format some of that information that's coming in. You might find that people are entering their first name without actually capitalizing their first name, very common. So to do that, we'll go to our text formulas, and we'll just select our capitalized text formula. And what that means is that whatever is within these brackets, and to add the capitalize, we just click on capitalize here. We move that first bracket, which would come here. So I just delete that bracket there, and then I go to the end of the thing that I'm trying to capitalize, and I just put in the same bracket from the keyboard. And now whatever's in those brackets is going to be capitalized, which means the first letter of each word will be a capital letter. We could also add in a module for the phone number. So phone numbers, for instance, quite often you'll need to format those in order to put those into a system. So there's a built-in phone formatter in make.com. You can find that by just typing in phone into the search, and it's this phone number module. And what we can do is we can put our phone number from our call event into here. Then we also need to set a default country for parsing. So I'm just going to put United States in here because I think that's what the phone number was parsed as. In fact, there's no phone number returned. So this may throw an error here because there's no phone number to return. There we go. So no phone number existed, therefore the scenario logic errored. But the email still existed and it would have done these two modules here correctly. So this is where the router comes in. I want to separate these two email modules, and I want to put those so that they are a separate path to the phone number. So now let's just put our ignore handler on the phone number so that the rest of the module, the scenario works. We'll do a run here. And you can see now the phone number still errors, but now we actually continue on with our email logic. Whereas before, if it was after the phone number, it would have not done the email subscribe logic. This is the correct layout for what we're trying to do. But now how do we get that phone number to actually map into our email system? Because we're doing it over in this path here, and the result is the result of this module. How do we call that or store that result and then read it and then paste it into this module here? Well, that's where we use the variables. So we're going to add a set variable here, and we're going to put that. Now, be careful here that we're not dragging it into the error pathway. You can see that's on the error pathway because the circles are just silhouettes. They're empty circles. So I can't just drag this in because it's going to try and stick into that error pathway. I'll have to click and drag the normal pathway to my variable module. Now I'll click auto align here. And now you can see, well, if it's successful, it will go here. If it's an error, it will go there. I'll just set the variable name of this to phone, and we'll set the variable value to be in international E164 format, which is essentially +1 for the US and in the phone number without the brackets and without the spaces and the hyphens that most people put in. Now, I'd normally also like to rename this, and I'll just put that as phone because then I know what the variable is called. And now we've set our variable up the top. We also need to then get our variable for this bottom part here. So I'll put in our get variable module. I'll put that before I want to use the data. So I want to use it here in this module, so I need to get it before that module. And I'll just put the names, etc. in there. Now when this runs, if it's successful, it will save the phone, then it will get the phone. And now I need to map the phone in this module here. So E64 does include country code, so we're meeting their requirements there. So let's just, because there's no phone number returned in the test data, I'm just going to put in a sample phone number here. So now we will run this. We'll send our data across. So there goes our data. We've got our phone number here. We can see valid, and we can see, well, it's formatted that, put the plus on at the start of it. We could also enter that with some rubbish that most people put in here, like this, and some spaces. If we tried to send that to most phone systems, we'd get an error because it's got spaces and special characters in it. So that's why this parsing module is quite useful, because it parses it into different formats, as you can see here. And then we can call that data. So what happens is it gets parsed, then we're saving one of those values, the one that we want, into the variable, and then we're getting that variable, and then we're sending that value to our email marketing system. And then the final check is, well, did that value make it across correctly into our system? Because sometimes systems will say, yes, it's been successful, and then it doesn't actually write it because it's not in the correct format. It doesn't error. It will just say it's successful and it won't write it. You can see it's got the data here written, and it knows it's in the US, and we'll save the scenario here. Wait for a little save in the bottom right. We'll turn the scenario on, and that means that now the scenario is live. And now we can do our first live test of the scenario. Okay, so now we need to talk about how to organize your workflows and also some security practices that you should take into account when you're using make.com. Now, once you've finished building your workflow, you really want to rename it, something that's going to make sense to you. A general naming structure that I use is to basically just put in the trigger. So the trigger in this case is going to be simply book me. I might abbreviate that to SB because I might have 6 or 7 of these scenarios. If you're using Calendly, I might just do Calendly or CL or something like that. Here I'll just do simply book me, SB, and then I do the action as to what the trigger was. So in this case, it would be call booked. And that way, if you have another scenario and it's a reschedule, then you would have call reschedule. If you had another one that was canceled, then the naming makes sense. You could also put the version in at the end. That generally becomes more helpful later on when you've got maybe 4 or 5 different versions of this. As you build on it and build on it and build on it, you might want to basically put this as version 1.0. Then later on, maybe you add ChatGPT here to I don't know, format the name or something like that. And you would then create a new version by cloning it, turning this old version off, and then you've got that there if you need to roll back to it in the future. There's no limit to the amount of scenarios that you can have inactive in your Make account. So you can put a whole bunch of old versions of scenarios in here if you like. Now let's talk about the security. What's important to keep in mind with Make.com and APIs in general is when you add a connection to Make.com, you're adding access to that application and all the endpoints in that API. Now, an endpoint is an action. So let's assume that you add a Google Mail, Gmail integration into Make.com. That's fine. Now you can send emails and you can receive emails and you can do a lot of automation with emails. Anyone with the access to Make.com, your Make.com account, can now access all of your connections in Make.com, which means that they could add a module of watching emails and they could start from beginning and they could download all the emails that you've ever sent and received from your Gmail account because you've got access to do that in Make.com. They could also have access to sending emails to anyone in your address book and sending spam emails or promotional emails, whatever. They could also download your entire address book. If you have access to CRMs and databases and things, anyone with access to your Make account, where the Make account has those connections, now has access to all of those databases, including, for instance, Xero or QuickBooks, any bank accounts that you might have connected up into here. So you have to be very mindful and intentional in what security you have in your Make account. So if you are thinking about adding users to your Make account, I definitely recommend using the users function rather than just sharing your primary login details, because that way you maintain the ownership of the account. Someone can't just change the password on your account and the email and then you get locked out. So I recommend setting them either as members or admins, depending on your trust level. And then you can also set accountant and developers and things to give them sort of windows into your system without giving them access to absolutely everything. Then you also need to consider doing some regular reviews and audits of anything that you've got connected. If you've just added an API connection for, say, Google Drive, and you've given it access to everything, that may be fine when you start that connection this year, but 5-10 years down the line, you may have added a password Google Sheet or something into that Google Drive account. And now you've compromised yourself because you've forgotten about this security with Make.com, right? You've given it access 10 years ago, and then you compromise it down the road. So you just have to be mindful of whatever you give access to when you're working in those apps to make sure that you don't compromise yourself later on by putting sensitive information in the wrong systems, for instance. Now let's talk a little bit about the optimizing of performance. When it comes to scenarios running efficiently, generally the least amount of modules that you can put in a scenario, the better. If you've got a scenario and it's got a really long, what I call a daisy chain of modules, and you may not even have a router, and you've just got them all in one line, which is a lot of beginners make this sort of scenario, where you've just got everything in one line, that's generally the wrong way to build your scenario. And that's because if something breaks, which we discussed and saw earlier, then all of the other things in that logic will break as well. But it also makes it really hard for mapping, because when it comes to mapping this particular module, when you load the mapping function here, you have to, or Make has to load everything before that module. So it's a poor way to build it for the user and for the Make system as well. So make sure that wherever you can, you're making use of these routers to segment off your automations, wherever it makes sense to do so, without having to use an absurd high amount of these variables. Because if you end up creating, 50 segments here, and you have to use set variable, get variable module 50 times, well, now you've got an extra 100 modules and you defeat the purpose of this logic, right? But for most of the time, you can just create these separate paths, and that will keep your scenario nice and compact and small. And if you really rely on these routers, you'll find that it's a lot easier to troubleshoot your scenario as well as build your scenario and the make editor will just be a little bit faster to load. You'll find that is particularly useful when you're building a big scenario of 100 modules or so in here, lots and lots of logic. It will just be a lot easier to build it this way. Now, when it comes to building or using routers, I also use routers when it comes to filters. Adding filters to scenarios can sometimes be a little bit cumbersome. So if we were to say add a filter here, and we wanted to say when the event name or slug or whatever it is, normally there'd be an ID or something here, which I would lean on, but the event name is equal to or contains test. You might end up with 7 or 8 of those if you've got 10 different event types on your call scheduler. When you have a whole bunch of those, normally I would put those in a separate router, right? So I'd put a router here. I would then put all my logic on this particular router and I'd stem them off. So these would be all the different event types here. And I wouldn't combine filters within the same router because I might have, if it's event A, event type B, event type C, but then I might have another router of if phone exists, then parse phone. That's okay, but it's much cleaner and much better to split that off and do if phone exists, then parse the phone, and then run this route all the time. And then in this instance, for the phone, you would actually not map the phone onto this one. You'd actually map it here between the routers, and even the subscriber you could probably do between, because in this instance, the only thing that we're changing is if it is event type new call versus event type existing client, we want to add them to a different sequence, a different email sequence in our sender system. So here we've compartmentalized the modules. That makes sense to do these modules for each of these routes, rather than how I see a lot of people doing it. They'll copy these all the time. They'll say, this is sequence 1, this is sequence 2 for the email sequence, and this is sequence 3. And they end up having more modules than what they need. These, you can see these 2 modules are repeated for all 3 of these routes. And it's only the last module where the actual group that we're adding these users to changes. The rest of the mapping and everything stayed the same. So there's no need to duplicate that, because if, for instance, the email mapping changes, now you have to change it in 3 different places. You're much better doing the segmentation that I showed you previously, which is adding the router here and then just routing or having different paths for those 3 different email automations that you've built here for those different event types that you've added to your call scheduler. So that's a clean way to build the scenario. So the simplest is normally the best way to do things in Make.com.